Now we go straight to a conversation around digging into the contracts of Kenya's debt and the sovereign bond. What does that mean? We know that the dollar, the Kenya shilling has strengthened against the dollar due to the euro bond and that conversation. And to have that conversation is Diana Gishango, National Coordinator, the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA, who is at Spice FM. Let's cross over and follow that conversation live.
And if you borrowed, therefore, as debt evolved, sovereign debt was to be at the lowest interest. You see, the same way taxation is a patriotic duty, that has been the negotiation around sovereign debt. That is why we borrowed from other governments who understood that we have an obligation to support citizens of other sovereign nations to develop. The minute public debt has such high interest, it affects every sector. At this point, as Okwa Uchumi, based on where we are, in addition to debt accountability, we are saying, is it time to renegotiate as a people? Are we okay with 8 shillings going to debt repayment and leaving nothing for essential services?
Okay. So what are the options?
So the options that we are proposing, one is, we've gone to court around accountability for all debt contracts. And that's a process that then we would get an order, but Parliament has an opportunity, based on their constitutional mandate, to already proceed and initiate on their own motion audit of all debt. All odious debt, therefore, should not be paid. Any debt that was not acquired, utilized, or repaid according to the Constitution is unconstitutional. That should be set aside, and whoever made those bad decisions for we, the Kenyan shareholders, then takes liability for that. Secondly, it is time to relook at the fact that debt has to be a fast charge. What percentage? We must create expenditure caps and repayment caps. For an economy like Kenya, we are saying it is time to say how much must be spent on education, on water, on health, as we repay debt. So that's a conversation that is of a national nature and need to move now from Treasury and move to Parliament. And we commence our own conversation. The countries that have done this are largely Burkina Faso in the 90s, Argentina. We redefine our debt agreement and renegotiate with all the creditors. We will repay you. But for now, the people who will repay you are these taxpayers. They need to be alive in 2048 to raise taxes to pay this Eurobond. But if we continue with the current expenditure, we are going to affect that.
Okay. Diana, what is the process here? So you're saying that Parliament can initiate an audit of all the debt at present. At best, how long do you give them to actually conduct a forensic audit on the debt? Because it's not just an audit of a check. It's, you want it to be forensic. This is a shilling that was acquired in this debt. It was earmarked for this project. Okay, it was not. But then where did it end up? And if it didn't end up in something that is beneficial to the citizen, then we call that, right? We put it aside. If this was not acquired constitutionally, we put it aside. And all those, that has to be a very deep dive into our debt. How long should Parliament take?
I think for all the debt, particularly for the last 10 years, and with the institutions that we have and resources, we should be able to get an expansive team that takes 6 months.
So 6 months of auditing the current debt.
Yes.
In the intervening 6 months, are we repaying the debt or have we paused repayment of debt?
Luckily for some of the debt, there is debt that is already flagged by our institution. I think any debt that is already flagged as questionable, Parliament can then pause. that particular repayment.
What would that mean? Does Parliament have the power to say we are not going to pay you?
The person who contracts debt has delegated power from Parliament. Therefore, the person who has the ultimate power on debt in Kenya is Parliament.
Okay. But once you've already acquired the debt, can you say, I'm not going to pay you until I find out where the money went?
Yes.
Without any repercussion?
There would be repercussions, definitely.
Okay.
There would be repercussions of if we therefore go ahead and pose this, and we are wrong, all processes and procedures, due diligence was done, then we are liable for penalties. But even without that audit, we have faced so many penalties because even within Treasury, some of the debt contracts, we do not understand them. The people who contracted them do not understand, so we keep accruing penalties. So it is a balancing act. It is a balancing act of what is the best thing for this country. Do we continue on this trend that continues to burden us, seems to be draining us and drowning us, or do we take very decisive steps? Countries, think about the tuna bond. Nobody thought a nation like Mozambique would go after people who thought they had procured a Eurobond for infrastructure very well. But based on the strength of their investigation, that debt has been removed from the debt records and the debt burdens of Mozambique. That then is a possibility that will change the current trajectory. Because think about it, how comes we are the country that is issuing the highest interest rates for both domestic and international bonds?
So it seems pretty high, but then the rationale behind it, is that being questioned? Why would you do something so high? Can you actually afford to pay that kind of interest on a bond for whoever would purchase? Can you afford to pay? Or will you get to the point whereby you say, actually, we're not able to meet this obligation of payment of interest, and then we fall back on that? What does that mean? That essentially you got money for which you're not ready to take responsibility for in the future?
Yeah.
Is that what we are saying?
That's exactly what we are saying. And we're already on that trajectory. That since the first Eurobond, every maturity, we have met the obligation by issuing another Eurobond. So a debt to pay a debt. That is not even sustainable. And it also means that our credit risk levels are very high. So every time we have to issue it at a higher interest rate. For the longest time, sovereign debt never exceeded 2%. We are at 10% for international. Domestically, we are at 18%. What that means is locally, borrowing for anybody who is a high-risk creditor, high-risk debtor, all these people who have defaulted on Tala, Fuliza, and so on, is 25 and above. What development can you do when you're repaying loans at 25%? But most importantly, that money, we will never see it in the Kenyan economy. But the Kenyan economy and the Kenyan people are the ones who will ultimately meet this obligation. Until we realize the level of participation that is required to reset.
I'm sorry, I know we want to go to break. We'll do that after, okay.
Break time. 28 minutes to 8. Diana Gishengo is our guest this morning. She's the National Coordinator of the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA. TISA is a member of the Okoa Uchumi movement. They are demanding accountability on Kenya's sovereign debt and saying, okay, we have been told 11 trillion shillings. What does that mean? Who do we owe? How did we acquire it? Where did the money go? Why are we paying it back? To what extent? And all those questions. What Diana is saying has actually been said in different words by the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury. When he was here, Professor Jogona Ndongo said, yes, we actually need to do an audit into these debts. The leader of the majority in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, he sat here, he said, actually, yes, we need to create an audit into all this debt and see what did they do with the money. So it's not a new conversation. The question I want to know is, when?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Thank you very much, Eric, and it's good to be at the Situation Room.
Always a pleasure coming here. This is the most challenging interview panel in Kenya. You guys are very well informed, and as you can see, Charles today, very philosophical.
To be poor in this country is the greatest sin you can commit, not just from a legal perspective, but from life generally. Yeah. It is very, very skewed.
We've just heard on the floor of Parliament, just most recently, a leader within the ODM saying that Sisi ni ng'ombe is a baba.
Yeah.
Which means that you are willing to be milked dry.
You cannot force me to believe. I'll give way. If it's land that I'm told to return to you, I will. Okay? Because the court has said so. But I'll continue saying, watu wamenirusha. That's all that I'm doing.
The